Black pepper. This spice rewrote the world's maps. Roman traders carried it across the empire by the 1st century, and by the late Middle Ages, pepper was so valuable in Europe that whole cargoes were measured against gold by weight. The hunt for a direct sea route to the pepper coast drove Vasco da Gama's voyage to India in 1498, opening the era of European maritime colonialism. The plant behind all of it is a tropical climbing vine called Piper nigrum, native to the Malabar coast of India. Black, white, green, and red peppercorns all come from the same berry. Only the ripeness at harvest and the processing differ, which means every kitchen argument about which peppercorn is best is really an argument about timing. Today, Vietnam is the world's largest pepper producer, exporting over 200,000 tons per year. Pre-ground pepper loses most of its volatile aromatic oils within weeks, which is why every serious kitchen grinds it fresh. Saffron. It is the most expensive agricultural crop on Earth by weight, and has been more expensive than gold for most of recorded history. The reason is brutal arithmetic. Each saffron crocus flower produces only 3 red stigmas, and it takes roughly 75,000 flowers to make a single pound of dried saffron. The harvest happens by hand, in the few hours before the sun fully opens the petals and damages the threads. Iran produces around 90% of the world's supply, with Spanish La Mancha and Kashmir making up most of the rest. Adulteration is so common that real saffron is sold by the gram in glass vials, and turmeric is sometimes ground into cheap saffron powder to fake the color. Authentic saffron has a honeyed, hay-like, faintly metallic flavor that no substitute reproduces. The global saffron market is worth over $1.5 billion annually. A single gram can retail for more than $10 even in producing countries. Vanilla. It is the only orchid that produces an edible fruit, and for centuries it could only be cultivated in one part of the world. The vanilla orchid evolved alongside a single species of stingless bee native to Mexico, and outside that bee's range, the plant simply refused to fruit. The problem was solved in 1841 by a 12-year-old enslaved boy named Edmond Albius on the French island of Réunion, who invented a hand pollination technique that the entire global vanilla industry still uses today. Real vanilla beans are cured for months and develop hundreds of aromatic compounds. Madagascar now produces roughly 80% of the world's vanilla, making it the country's most valuable export. Most products labeled natural vanilla flavor actually contain vanillin extracted from wood pulp or paper mill byproducts, chemically identical to one molecule in the bean but missing everything else. The global vanilla market regularly exceeds $4 billion. Cinnamon. What is sold in most supermarkets is almost certainly not cinnamon. True cinnamon comes from the inner bark of Cinnamomum verum, a tree native to Sri Lanka, and produces thin, papery quills that crumble easily between the fingers. The much cheaper substitute, cassia, comes from a different tree from southern China and Indonesia. Its bark is hard, hollow, and curls into a single thick spiral. Cassia contains coumarin, a compound that can damage the liver in large doses, while true cinnamon contains almost none. Most of the cinnamon sold in North American supermarkets is in fact cassia. The flavor difference is real once tasted side by side. True cinnamon is delicate, citrusy, and floral, while cassia is hot, sharp, and one-dimensional. The retail price gap can be 10 to 1. Sri Lanka still produces over 90% of the world's true cinnamon. The bark is harvested during the rainy season, when moisture makes it easier to peel. Nutmeg and mace. They are not two different spices but two parts of the same fruit. The nutmeg tree produces a peach-like fruit whose seed is the nutmeg, and the bright red lacy webbing wrapped around that seed is mace. For centuries, this single tree grew only on the Banda Islands in eastern Indonesia, and the Dutch monopoly on nutmeg in the 17th century triggered one of the most lopsided trade deals in history. In 1667, the Dutch ceded their claim to the island of Manhattan to the English in exchange for the tiny island of Run, the last Banda Island the English still held. In large enough doses, nutmeg contains myristicin, a mild hallucinogen, which is why teaspoons appear in old recipes and tablespoons appear in modern poison control reports. Mace has a subtler, more saffron-like flavor and commands roughly twice the price of nutmeg by weight. Cardamom. It is the third most expensive spice in the world, after saffron and vanilla, and the green and black versions are not the same plant. Green cardamom comes from Elateria cardamomum, native to the rainforests of southern India, and is the variety used in Indian chai, Scandinavian baking, and Arab coffee. Black cardamom is a larger, smoke-dried pod from a different genus entirely, with a bold, almost camphorous flavor. The biggest producer of green cardamom today is not India but Guatemala, where German immigrants planted it in the early 20th century and discovered a climate so well suited that Guatemalan pods now dominate global supply. A single pod contains around 20 seeds, and almost all of the aroma sits in those seeds, not in the husk. Pre-ground cardamom loses most of its character within days. In the Middle East, cardamom-spiced coffee is a gesture of hospitality so central that it accounts for a significant share of global imports. Cloves. Each clove is an unopened flower bud, picked just before it blooms and dried in the sun until it turns hard, dark brown, and intensely fragrant. The active compound is eugenol, the same molecule used in dental anesthetics, which is why a clove pressed against an aching tooth offers genuine pain relief, a remedy that predates modern dentistry by centuries. For most of its history, the clove tree grew only on 5 tiny volcanic islands in the Maluku archipelago of Indonesia, and the Dutch went to extreme lengths in the 17th century to maintain the monopoly, including burning every clove tree outside their controlled zones. But the monopoly eventually failed. In Indonesia today, more cloves are smoked in Kretek cigarettes than are used in cooking. A tree once worth a colonial war now fuels a tobacco habit. The aroma of cloves comes from eugenol, which makes up 80 to 90% of clove essential oil by weight. Sumac. Long before lemons reached the Middle East, cooks there used sumac to add tartness to food. The deep red ground spice comes from the dried and crushed berries of a flowering shrub in the Rus genus, and despite the name it has no connection to poison sumac, which belongs to a different group entirely. The flavor is bright and lemony without any of the liquid acidity of citrus, which makes it useful exactly where moisture would ruin a dish. Sprinkled on grilled meats, rubbed into kebabs, or dusted over the top of hummus. It is the tang in za'atar, the Levantine herb blend, and a defining element of Persian rice dishes. Most of the world's culinary sumac comes from Turkey and Iran. The berries are harvested in autumn and sun-dried before grinding. Their deep crimson color also makes sumac a natural fabric dye used for centuries in the Mediterranean. Star anise. The 8-pointed seed pod of an evergreen tree native to southern China and Vietnam, star anise tastes nothing like the unrelated anise seed it was named after, despite sharing one aromatic compound. Its real strategic value is biochemical. Star anise is the natural source of shikimic acid, the precursor used to manufacture Tamiflu, the antiviral drug stockpiled during influenza outbreaks. During the 2005 bird flu scare, global star anise supplies briefly ran out as pharmaceutical companies bought up the harvest. In the kitchen, it is one of the 5 spices in Chinese 5-spice powder, central to Vietnamese pho broth, and the defining flavor of French pastis. A single pod is enough to perfume an entire pot of stew. The compound responsible for its licorice-like taste is anhel, which is about 13 times sweeter than sugar. Sichuan peppercorn. Despite the name, it is not a pepper at all and contains neither capsaicin nor piperine. It comes from the dried husks of berries from prickly ash trees, and its signature effect is a literal numbing tingle on the lips and tongue, produced by a molecule called hydroxy-alpha-sanshool that fires the body's touch receptors at a frequency around 50 Hz. This is the Kainmen mala, the numbing and spicy combination that defines much of Sichuan cuisine when paired with chili peppers. The United States banned the import of Sichuan peppercorns from 1968 until 2005, not over flavor but over fear that a citrus disease could hitchhike on the husks and devastate California's orange groves. For 37 years, an entire generation of American cooks had no access to the real thing. In Chongqing, whole peppercorns are sometimes chewed raw as a palate cleanser between courses. Fenugreek. It is the secret behind a dozen flavors that nobody attributes to it. The dominant aroma compound in fenugreek is sotalon, the same molecule that gives commercial maple syrup its smell, which is why most artificial maple flavoring is fenugreek-derived, and why people who eat large amounts of fenugreek seeds famously notice their sweat starting to smell faintly like maple syrup within a day. It is one of the foundational spices in curry powder, where its slightly bitter, nutty, almost burnt sugar character anchors the blend. The plant is a small annual legume cultivated since at least ancient Egypt, where seeds have been found inside tombs. Modern medicine investigates it for blood sugar effects, with mixed but ongoing results. India produces over 60% of the world's fenugreek, mostly in the state of Rajasthan. The seeds are rock hard when raw, and must be toasted or soaked before grinding. Asafoetida. Raw, it smells aggressively of sulfur and rotting onion, which is why its Old English name is devil's dung. Cooked in hot oil, it transforms within seconds into a smooth allium flavor that reads as a mix of onion and garlic. It is harvested as the dried resin from the roots of a giant fennel relative that grows wild in Iran and Afghanistan, and is sold as hard chunks or pre-mixed with flour to make it easier to handle. In Jain cooking, where the use of onions and garlic is forbidden because pulling up the whole plant kills it, asafoetida is the workaround that delivers the same savory depth without breaking the dietary rule. A single pinch is enough to season an entire pot of dal. The resin hardens into reddish-brown tears that can last for years if stored airtight. Its pungent smell disappears so completely when fried that first-time users often think something went wrong. Long pepper. When ancient Roman writers said pepper, this is what they usually meant. Long pepper, a small catkin-shaped relative of black pepper from India and Indonesia, was the dominant peppercorn in European cooking from antiquity through the early Middle Ages, valued for being hotter and more aromatic than the round black peppercorns that would later replace it. Black pepper only displaced it after sea routes made the rounder, easier to grind peppercorn cheaper to import in bulk. By the 17th century, long pepper had nearly vanished from European kitchens, surviving mainly in North African and Indonesian cooking. The flavor is hotter and more layered than black pepper, with notes of cinnamon, nutmeg, and earth that no round peppercorn delivers. In parts of Indonesia, long pepper is still dried whole on bamboo mats in the sun. The dried catkins resemble tiny pine cones, dark gray and covered in a grid of seed pockets. Grains of paradise. A West African relative of cardamom and ginger, grains of paradise was once a major European trade spice, valuable enough that the stretch of African coastline where it was harvested became known as the Pepper Coast or Grain Coast, names still preserved in the modern map of Liberia. Portuguese traders brought it to Europe in the 14th century, where it served as a cheaper substitute for black pepper before the sea routes to India broke open. After that, it nearly disappeared. The flavor is unlike anything else in the spice rack. Peppery heat layered with citrus, cardamom, and a faint hint of pine. It is currently being rediscovered by craft brewers, who use it in Belgian-style ales, and by gin distillers, who treat it as a non-juniper aromatic. The seeds are small, reddish-brown, and crack between the teeth with an immediate warmth. Medieval English brewers used it to spike ale before hops became standard. From saffron's hand-harvested threads to the long pepper Rome traded for, every common spice carries a story longer than most countries. Wars were fought over them, trade routes redrawn, and entire economies built on a single dried berry or bark. Let us know in the comments which one we should go deep on next.